Hey, good afternoon. Today is Friday, June the 28th, 2024, and the time now is 3:45 p.m. So, in terms of geopolitics, in terms of international relations, in terms of the division of power, the division of economic might or economies or economics, in terms of the division of finance, in terms of power and prestige, Russia is supposed to be a pariah state. Russia is supposed to be a destroyed country, especially given what is happening today with the war in Ukraine and the West basically fighting Russia. Let's be honest. What is happening in Ukraine, whether or not Russia attacked illegally or whether or not Ukraine is defending itself, what is happening in Ukraine, it is obvious that it is a war between the West and Russia. The West is basically fighting Russia and using Ukraine. As they've said many times, okay, prominent Western individuals, that they're using Ukrainian bodies and Western bullets. But in terms of how international relations works and in terms of power and prestige, Russia is supposed to be a pariah state, and the West, most especially the white West, the conceptual West, and most specifically the G7, excluding Japan, because Japan is not a Western country. Excluding Japan, the biggest and most powerful Western countries in the world, okay? Let's say the G6 are supposed to be the dominant, the most powerful, the most prestigious, and the most put together, okay? The most loved. But something happened last week which seemed to be saying the contrary. So last week saw the G7 summit, and also last week gave us Russian President Vladimir Putin basically traveling, basically making state visits to countries in Asia. Now, Putin visit two important countries that I want to highlight: North Korea and Vietnam. Now, I want to highlight the significance of Putin's trip, or what I believe to be the significance of his trip, and also contrast that with some of the things that happened during the G7 summit in Italy. One is that if Russia and Vladimir Putin were supposed to be a pariah state and an isolated country or an isolated leader, then what happened last week, okay, with Vladimir Putin's trip to Asia, okay, to countries in Asia, basically said the contrary. One being that Vladimir Putin first arrived in Pyongyang, North Korea, and the way he was received basically mirrors times when leaders are received, okay, during peacetime. And I'm talking about times that are not what is happening today with the war in Ukraine, the situation in the Middle East and elsewhere. He was received well, okay? And he was received with prominence. Now, looking at videos of his reception, I was basically not surprised, but I basically shook my head in one, being in disbelief, but also in taking the fact that we could be seeing the emergence of a different kind of world, which in this case, we could be seeing a rising Russia that could be able to turn the table against the West, basically keep the West isolated rather than the West isolating it, or rather than the West isolating her, Russia, or Vladimir Putin, him. So he was given the leader's welcome, or let's say he was given a welcome that is often given by a powerless or a global south country or leader to a leader of the white west, the conceptual west, the big and powerful countries. Okay, but I want to say that that was not the case here, and I do believe when Russian President Vladimir Putin went to North Korea, Pyongyang, that both countries saw their relationship as equal, and North Korea was not playing the inferior game. Okay, it was basically a country trying to showcase itself and trying to welcome another country, a powerful country, and potentially cultivate a relationship or rebuild their relationship. Let's face it, Russia is not an isolated country, and Russia is rising. It is not only rising, it is rising rapidly. I think it is about time that in this world we speculate, or we stress the idea that Russia is now a peer to the Western country. It is not isolated. It is not being beaten. It is rising, and it probably, if it continues, if it maintains the power, the rising that it is getting or experiencing, it is going to be a menace for the West, and it could probably throw the kitchen sink at the West. And there are lots of kitchen sinks out there that, should Russia throw them at the West, it is going to be destructive for the West. I'm talking about culturally, technologically, financially, military, and so on. So Vladimir Putin was well received. Okay, he was given a gun salute. He was given the opportunity to review the troops, the North Korean honor guards, and there were many people during his reception, and there are children and youth basically dancing and waving the Russian and the North Korean flag. It basically demonstrates a notion of prominence, I do believe, or it seems, for the Russians. At the time when the West is acting or basically attempting to isolate Russia, if you're Vladimir Putin and if you're a Russian, the reception in North Korea was a good thing. We also saw the same thing in Vietnam. When Putin visited Vietnam, from where he was to go into the palace, okay, I think that, what is it, the presidential palace, there were young students in full uniform, okay, lined the street, holding Russian flags and Vietnamese flags and waving them, okay, waving them. He was received, okay. He hasn't won the war in Ukraine yet. The West hasn't collapsed yet, finally, as many are predicting, and that could happen. But he was well received. And as I've said earlier, his reception in Vietnam demonstrated prominence for Vladimir Putin and for Russia. But one thing that I find to be very interesting is the historical connection that both North Korea and Vietnam share with Russia. And this goes back to the days of colonialism and decolonization, and or the Cold War, when Russia or Russian Soviet forces basically trained the Vietnamese, supported the Vietnamese in their war against the United States and France and so on. And also the same thing with North Korea as well, okay, where the Soviet Union basically was in support of both China and North Korea. So the resemblance, okay, the semblance in terms of how he was received, and the cultural tie and some of the symbolic ties in terms of diplomacy, it is profound. So the cultural connection and the symbolism that I was able to recognize, okay, between the trips, okay, or both countries, North Korea on one hand and Vietnam on another hand, or on the other hand, both countries do trace at least their current military tradition, okay? Even when you look at their military parades, it seems to be fashioned from the Soviet Union. For example, if you also look at the tradition of Soviet parade, which the Russians continue today in terms of their May 9th parades. If you compare that to the parade, the military parade in Vietnam and that of North Korea, and even in China, it's the same thing. Okay, you can see the cultural connection. So, so far, so far, Russian president's trip to Vietnam and North Korea is being criticized by prominent people in international relations and many experts out there. And they've gone as far as criticizing the pact or the diplomatic or military agreement, okay, so-called, that Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un signed, okay? And there is allegations out there from the West that North Korea was supposed to send troops to Ukraine to support the Russians, which is nonsense. There are also allegations that North Korea is sending missiles and shells to Russia because Russia has depleted its arsenal as a result of the war in Ukraine. So there seems to be lots of allegations out there, okay, suppositions coming from the West. But this is something that by now I'm used to, and I'm sure you are used to. And this is nothing but speculation and senseless accusation that basically it is kind of like a projection that the West is projecting its experience currently to the Russians and others. But there are historical connections that exist between Russia and North Korea and Russia and Vietnam. And I'm sure that is what Vladimir Putin went out there to establish. But also to basically put the West on notice. One source that I looked at, okay, one expert did stress that Putin is making it known that if the United States, or at least since the United States and the West continues to support Ukraine, especially in its recent bombardment, okay, firing into Russian territory, that Russia basically reserves the right to do the same thing, to basically arm North Korea and protect and defend North Korea. However, I don't think that is going to be the case, and I don't think that is the case because Vladimir Putin is not looking for war with South Korea or with Japan. Russia is not looking for war. But also, I do believe that is to put the West and the United States on the blast that if you continue to attack us indirectly, we can do the same. We can support your enemy. And earlier I did spoke that Russia basically can throw the kitchen sink at the West. There are lots of angry people, institutions, and countries out there, okay, that are angered because of things that the West has done. Russia can basically arm these institutions and countries to basically defend themselves against the West. Not so much defeat the West, but defend themselves against the West. North Korea is one such country during the Korean War that was able to withstand the West or the United Nations led by the United States. Okay? And Vietnam was another country that basically defeated the United States, okay, in the war during the Vietnamese War with the United States. So this perhaps it is the symbolism that Vladimir Putin wants to like reestablish and to basically project to the West that you are vulnerable as well, okay? To project to the United States, most especially. But I started earlier by saying that if the West, and in this case, the G7 is supposed to be powerful, and that Russia is supposed to be a pariah state, it seems as if there is contradiction, okay? The reality is quite different. So once again, I'm gonna repeat. If the West was supposed to project power and Russia was supposed to be a pariah state, then the reality that we saw with Vladimir Putin's trip does show us a contradiction, okay? But I want to stress one thing. It seems that Russia is gaining power, okay? It appears to be winning in Ukraine, and the West appears to be declining. But one important question that I want to ask, given the increase in Russia's power and prestige, will Russia maintain the power and prestige that it is gaining? Especially dealing with the fact that countries that are now embracing Russia and countries that are refusing to condemn Russia are basically taking risk, which means that Russia must win in Ukraine and Russia must continue to rise and maintain its power and prestige. Because if it doesn't, these countries are going to be bombarded and defeated and attacked by the West in various ways, okay? Leaders are going to be assassinated or deposed in various ways, okay? So in that case, I do believe right now there is pressure, okay, on the Russian government and on Russia to win in Ukraine as a means to maintain its prominence and its power so that it can be a protection for the countries in the global south, most especially that are now either embracing Russia or refusing to condemn Russia. So I want to express this supposition or speculation, if you will. But if the West was supposed to be powerful and Russia was supposed to be weak, then the reality that we saw with Putin's trip must be noted. One thing I want to stress in terms of Western power, okay, one such institution that is an example of Western power is the G7. But even the G7 is basically, it seems to be declining, or it has declined significantly in terms of its prominence in global economics and finance, or in terms of global GDP. The G7 as of now makes up 25.8% of world's GDP. Basically, the G7, the most powerful or the strongest seven economies in the world, okay? We are talking about Japan, which is the only non-white, non-Western country. The United States, France, Canada, Italy, Germany. Who else am I missing? I don't know. The United Kingdom, yes. So the G7, the United States, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Canada, Japan, and I just missed another one. But you get the point. But anyway, the G7 as of now makes up 25.8% of world's GDP. Then let's look at BRICS, okay? BRICS, an organization which was created to basically, I won't say contradict, but to be an alternative to the Western dominated world out there, or economic activities out there, especially dealing with the fact that the West always go on the sanction spree. So BRICS, an organization which Russia is part of, BRICS makes up 37.3% of global GDP. So the G7, which is led by the United States, makes up 25.8% of world's GDP, and BRICS already, which is an organization that China and Russia are part of, makes up 37.3%. So once again, just to repeat, okay, G7, which is an organization, a financial economic organization, okay, of the richest and most powerful economies in the world, led by the United States. And these are Canada, France, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Japan, which is the only non-white, non-Western countries. Now, G7 so far makes up 25.8% of the world's GDP. And then you have BRICS, which is a growing organization, okay, being led by China, which is the economic and financial juggernaut as of now, and a country that is helping countries all over the world develop in various ways, something the West hasn't done. And then Russia. So BRICS, led by China and Russia, okay, makes up 37.3% of the world's GDP. Okay, so now, in terms of the demonstration of power, okay, Russian president's trip to countries in Asia, okay, and his reception in both North Korea and Vietnam basically demonstrate a level of power and prominence that the West or Western countries, most especially the big one, the most powerful ones, have always cultivated or propagate of themselves or for themselves, okay, where they are taken seriously, they are given all levels of respect. It demonstrates, okay, the trip and his reception demonstrate seriousness. It demonstrates a level of organization, of well prep, okay, of business, of importance. Now, on the other hand, I've been paying attention to the G7. I've been looking at a couple of, I have looked at videos from the recent G7 summit in Italy. And it is horrible. It is horrible. Lots of things about the G7 that demonstrate lack of seriousness. It demonstrates disunity. It demonstrates unprofessionalism, and it also it demonstrates mediocre levels of competence. Couple of things that I want to highlight. One being Joe Biden. In one of the video, I think it's either day one or so or day two or whatever. So there was a time when a couple of guys were flying to the venues with the flags of the G7 countries. And they are basically posing for the pictures. And Joe Biden basically went wandering around. And to the point where the Italian prime minister basically held them, okay, called his attention and pulled him back. And at that moment, Sunak, the prime minister of the United Kingdom, basically came closer to Joe Biden. It is as if these were young people trying to guide their elderly grandmother or grandfather and basically trying to prevent him or her from humiliating him or herself or the family. That's what it seems as if. Like they basically rushed to Joe Biden and trying to get him back on topic and on track and get him back to where he was supposed to be and doing what he was supposed to be doing. Basically preventing him from humiliating himself or the family. Now, another thing that I noticed is the British Prime Minister, when he went to hug the Italian Prime Minister, I don't know whether he was about to mouth kiss her, but it was unique but very I won't say disappointing, but very interesting. Okay, it was scary. And Sunak basically looked out of place. He looked like a he looked like a nerd, a nerdy colored kid that finally, because of his smartness, was basically welcomed to an all-white party, okay, where the rich white kids are hanging out, and basically is their club, and he feels like he's part of them. But the truth is, he is only recognized and accepted because of what he brings. Okay, he might be smart, his family is rich, or what quality he brings, but he is not part of them. They don't care for him. Okay, he looked very much out of place. Okay, and he basically kept reaching his head, reaching towards the Italian prime minister's face, like, okay, or in her space, like he was about to kiss her or whatever. And she kept pulling her head back. Okay, and I don't know, man. I know if this guy Sunak go and look at these images, these videos, he probably will be disappointed in himself. Also, there is a clip of the Italian prime minister, the way she was staring at Macron, the French president, Emmanuel Macron. It's as if she was about to hit him. Okay? Now, the Italian prime minister has been throwing shot at Macron recently, basically just disrespecting the hell out of the French president. But to sum it all up, the G7 summit basically doesn't live up to expectation or live up to the image of itself and the individual countries that makes up the G7 that they've cultivated for themselves and for the organization, the group. Okay? It demonstrates cracks. It demonstrates lack of effort. It demonstrates mediocre level of competence. It demonstrates disunity. It demonstrates isolation and the reality and the potential that many of these leaders are probably not welcome or they just don't fit in. But they are trying to project unity in front of the camera. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to end by first reading the description for this program, which I believe can serve as a summary, a conclusion, and also it does pose questions that I hope you can answer or help me answer. Or you can basically join the conversation in terms of all of us as a global community answering these questions. So I'm going to read the title of the program first, or video or talk, and then I will continue with the rest of the document. So the title for this talk or program is TAHI Geopolitics, Episode 3, Putin State Visit, North Korea, Vietnam, G7 Confusion. Once again, the title is TAHI Geopolitics, Episode 3, Putin State Visit, North Korea, Vietnam, G7 Confusion. Now, of course, TAHI means Trends and Headlines in Geopolitics. Once again, TAHI means Trends and Headlines in Geopolitics. I'm going to read. This talk explores the significance of Putin's recent state visit, North Korea's role, Vietnam's emergence, and the G7 confusion. The visit and embrace of the Russian president could be a real-time signal of Russia's rising power and evidence of the West's declining power. Though the G7 organization is supposed to demonstrate Western economic and financial dominance, it is becoming less dominant as organizations such as BRICS continue to expand. As Russia continues cultivating partnership worldwide, G7 shows cracks and dysfunctionality never seen before. Now, comments or questions. Number one, will the current and rising Russia remain permanent? If so, how and why? Number two, what consequence will the countries and leaders embracing Russia experience should Russia's current emergence stall and it fail to maintain strength in the near and far future? Number three, what could be the possible punishment the West and its allies imposed on countries currently embracing Russia and causing humiliation for the West? Number four, is pressure circulating from countries embracing Russia to defeat Ukraine, and why? So these are important questions. Now, number four is very significant because I do believe that by countries boldly embracing Vladimir Putin and Russia and failing to condemn Vladimir Putin and Russia, it is basically they are shoving their fingers in the eyeballs of the West. The West is going to come back and clap back. Therefore, I do believe that countries are right now pressuring Russia. Get on with this, win this thing, end this thing as soon as possible so that the world can reset. Because the more and the longer this continues, and if Russia was to lose this war, then it put those countries that are embracing Russia and those countries that have not condemned Russia in a very sticky situation with the West. Not only that, their reputation could be tainted, but the West is going to come hard at them. And a defeated Russia will be in a position where it is not only going to be humiliated in geopolitics, okay, in global affairs, but it will be reluctant to come and defend these countries when the mighty West that has defeated Russia in Ukraine begins to rain down sanctions and discipline on these countries. So yes, I do believe that countries are right now pressuring Russia to win this war, to end it as soon as possible so they can move on. So that's it, friends. I hope to hear from you. I hope that you can tell me what you think. I hope that you can help me answer these questions. I hope that you can join the conversation. I want to hear from you. So please give me your input. Okay, let me know what I said wrong. Let me know what I can do to make my talk or my programs or my video to improve. Okay, thank you very much for being part of this community. Okay, the Echoing Voice community. Thank you very much for sharing with your friends and families the links. But most importantly, thank you very much for watching the Echoing Voice. Peace.